Advani ji, Salman Saab, Mr. Advani, Dr. Pranjay, and distinguished guests. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you this evening to the release of the peace agenda for Indian foreign policy. I also welcome Mr. Ravi. It has been part of our policy to publish books on contemporary issues. This book is part of that attempt. Though slim in size, as Harold Nicholson's book on diplomacy and Mao's book on guerrilla warfare, yet it equally presents a definite and different viewpoint. We feel honored to have been given an opportunity by the two authors to be the publishers of the book. We have enjoyed working together, and I hope you also enjoy reading it. Lastly, I extend you again a very hearty welcome, particularly to Advani ji, Mr. Salman Khurshid, Mr. Natwar Singh, Mr. Dua, and Mr. Malhotra. May I now request the two authors to make short presentations, starting with Mrs. Soni, followed by Dr. Pranjay.
To work with Mr. Narendra Kumar on placing certain ideas in a capsule form for the consideration of the foreign policy and internal security communities. The point of departure has been that if in India we take more interest in developing a problem-solving approach, if we develop a positive attitude to multilateral negotiations and also try to overcome the obstacles in bilateral negotiations which we find with China and Pakistan, we would be able to perhaps place the Indian situation in a context appropriate to the post-Cold War world. In fact, we do not think we have exhausted the framework which we think is in the minds of most Indians today, which is that we would like India's military strength and our problem-solving ability to be joined. Most Indians would like to be well prepared for the era of cooperation, and in place of existing conflict paradigms, both in the political arena and in terms of the intellectual assessment of these problems, we would hope that the time has come to combine expertise and experience in developing ideas and prescriptions which would help the country and also help the Asian and the world community to turn a new chapter in relations. I would suggest to all those who may care to read the book that what we have found is that given an enthusiastic publisher like Mr. Narendra Kumar, who was able to help in a dialogue between the authors and between himself, it was possible to work out certain areas which perhaps we would not have attempted otherwise. For example, we tried to understand the experiences of many countries, including India, in the recent Uruguay round of multilateral trade talks. And we also tried to understand how a country like the United States became concerned with CNN and with questions of sending their cultural publicity to Europe. And seeing all this, I think both the authors, without having any special expertise in each of these areas, but we could develop a point of view which we would think might invite similar efforts on the part of other groups. It also enabled an academic from Jawaharlal Nehru University and an academic from Pune University to overcome the closed nature of academic life in this country, to share certain perceptions. And I think one of these was about India. We came to the conclusion that India is not a polarized society, that it is possible for us to overcome a certain propaganda against India. And the chapterization in the book would enable other scholars to perhaps bring together democracy, market economy, human rights, environmental protection, and focus these on the area of negotiations. In other words, it could be possible for us to even think in terms of a new nationalism which would be oriented towards peace building. My own interest was more on interdependence. My colleague Shrikant Paranjpe brought in a sharp focus on national security and realist balance of power. I would now request him to perhaps give you a more specific view of the content of the book.
Mr. Chief Guest, respected speakers and friends, in formulating some of the dimensions of this book as Dr. Sondi was spelling out, we had 2 or 3 main areas in mind. One reflected what could be described as the strategic dimensions of India's foreign policy, in which one would include dimensions of nuclear policy, dimensions of conventional weapon systems, and issues relating to technology, whether it is the missile technology issues or space technology in general. We also looked at the non-strategic dimensions of security and those issues which affect Indian foreign policy, which included problems regarding the environment and ecological issues, problems of territorial democracies, problems of terrorism, problems relating to internal security, and finally we went into areas of trade and international economic dimensions. If one looks at the chapter scheme of this book, we have tried to raise issues in almost most of these areas. No claim is made that these are final solutions or policy recommendations that are being projected, but a claim is definitely made that a debate has to begin in terms of areas like problems of self-determination versus national integration, problems relating to internal security, especially relating to terrorism, low-intensity conflict, etc., problems relating to technology and defense industries, issues dealing with NPT, nuclear policies, since the NPT conference is now going on, issues dealing with disarmament and development, and now in the context of the forthcoming SAARC summit, issues relating to SAARC and the way in which South Asia would evolve in the coming years. The idea is to open this whole agenda of Indian foreign policy for debate. Some recommendations have been given in this book as policy recommendations to be considered, to be debated, and probably to be worked on. The idea is that probably each of this chapter might be developed into an eventual book by itself by a variety of scholars at a variety of institutions, whether in Delhi or outside, and eventually we should be able to formulate a very broad perspective about problems of foreign policy, also taking into consideration how their linkages are with domestic issues, both political, economic, and even socio-cultural dimensions. That, by and large, is the framework of the book. I think I would not take more time. I would request the speakers to take on. Thank you.
May I now request Advani ji to read the book? Maybe we would like to say a few words also.
Supposed to say it. Okay. Friends, I'm extremely grateful to Soni and to Narendra Kumar for having given me this honor of releasing the book and so describing me as the chief guest of this function. Otherwise, I don't think I have any credentials for that job, except that Sondiji is a close associate and friend. I do remember that my first responsibility in public life was as the Speaker of the local assembly here, Metropolitan Council when it was called. And it is then that I gathered that the Speaker of the House is the member who speaks the least. And so far as this particular book is concerned, as Sondiji and Srikanti indicated, the subject taken up is very wide. And so Sondiji was right when he said that we've tried to put our ideas in a capsule. Because when you deal with problems as wide as relations with various countries and how they impinge on internal security, etc., it is a very onerous task. And so it is that I more see in this theories relating to conflict resolution rather than specific solutions to the problems that India faces as a country. Sondiji particularly is an expert in that field. As a person who is not an expert in the field to which this belongs, and therefore I had suggested to Sondiji that my senior colleague, Mr. Vajpayee, would be more suited for this particular assignment. And here I am, sandwiched by two ministers who've been dealing with the external affairs, who have dealt with external affairs. I hold that our capacity for conflict resolution in the international arena would very much depend on our capacity for conflict relation within the country. It is our ability to deal with domestic problems that will give us the necessary clout and ability to deal with international problems. Even Kashmir, for instance, or Punjab, for instance, these two states have been engulfed by terrorism for quite a period of time in the past. But the moment we have been able to deal with terrorism in Punjab, the world has stopped talking about human rights in Punjab. They continue to talk about human rights in Kashmir. And privately, those who accuse us the most, who attack us the most, privately say, you deal with the problem on the ground, succeed in that, we will not talk about it. I recall a small episode because there is a chapter in this book on self-determination. I recall that in the year 1991, I had occasion to participate in a conference at Strasbourg. It's a 4-yearly conference held there, in which problems related to democracy are discussed. And that year, in 1991, the issue under discussion and debate was the emerging democracies of the world and their problems. And the purpose of that conference was that, at least the intention was that the focus should be on the emerging democracies in Eastern Europe, or the various republics of USSR who had broken away from USSR, and talk about that. But Pakistan and that delegation led by the Speaker of Pakistan, their concern was somehow to bring in Kashmir. And so it was perhaps that I understand that our embassy wanted that, though earlier India had not been participating in these 4-yearly conferences, maybe in 1991 we do participate. We should go in order at least to be able to confront, to counter Pakistan's effort to rake up the Kashmir issue at Strasbourg. We had first spoken to the chairman and all the other officials concerned that this is a forum for discussing issues like democracy, and like it's not an issue where we are to thrash out bilateral problems. As for example, Kashmir, India and Pakistan, they said that we will not permit it. We will not allow it. And 1 or 2 efforts made by them, when they did not succeed, one of the Pakistani delegates raised the issue. He said that the threat to democracy is when there is a demand for self-determination, and that is sought to be suppressed by the use of taking force. That is one of the grave threats and perils to democracy. That's how he raised it, and brought in Kashmir indirectly without speaking about Kashmir. And when we had occasion to reply to that, I spoke and I referred to the fact that I happen to belong to Sindh, which is now in Pakistan. And like Pakistan, India also is a multilingual country. We happen to be multi-religious, they are also multi-religious, and we are, since independence, since our freedom from colonial rule, we have been exerting very systematically, assiduously, to build up a single nation state, even though it is multilingual, even though it is multi-religious, even though it is multi-ethnic. And we have succeeded, we are succeeding. And this concept of self-determination, where is it to apply to? If it is to be applied to every single linguistic group, or every single religious group, of every single ethnic group, most of the bigger countries of the world would be facing disintegration. And I'm sure that as Pakistan delegates also would appreciate this. If self-determination were to be conceded to Sindh, for instance, what would be the consequence? And I happen to belong to that part of the country. It happens that the person who was leading a very strong, powerful mass movement in that part of the world passed away only yesterday. Senior, he was beyond 90, and he was a participant in India's freedom movement. G.M. Said, he passed away yesterday. So that this problem of self-determination versus national integration was brought up in that conference in that manner. And I'm happy to see that that particular dimension has also been dealt with in a small chapter in this book. As I said, I'm happy to release this book. I'm sure that it will provoke debate. And the first debate on this particular book and the issues raised by the book, it will be our pleasure to listen to it, hear it, and profit by it. Thank you, Mr. President.
my very present duty now to moderate the discussion by very eminent and learned people who are authors themselves and who take their books rather seriously, read them. So let me first call upon Mr. Salman Khurshid, his Minister of State for External Affairs. I don't know why people have demoted him slightly in the order paper that has been given to me, and the same thing has been done to Mr. Natwar Singh in his previous in the same job. But that's a very minor point. Salman. Thank you.
Advaniji, Dr. Singh Sahab, distinguished panelists, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I'm extremely careful every time I speak on academic research or academic propositions regarding foreign policy, because of the job that I hold, it becomes extremely tricky to comment on or even show a preference for a point of view that might not strictly be in conformity with the stated official position of our country as far as foreign policy is concerned. Nevertheless, it's an invitation to come to a seminar such as this or a panel discussion such as this is too tempting and exciting, especially when you have the benefit of it being presided by Advaniji, to refuse. And therefore, I am here at some peril to myself, because I would like to say something which might, in a sense, appear controversial outside, but which I believe in terms of academic perceptions, in terms of what the distinguished authors have tried to do in this book, is the least that one can do in terms of responding to a very exciting proposition that they have faced. I have the advantage in saying what I will say of a long conversation with Mr. Sondhi, who I've admired from some distance for many, many years, and with whom it's only very recent weeks that I have acquired a greater acquaintance and closeness in terms of exchange of ideas. He has, I believe, a very significant interest in a field of some concern to us, which is conflict management and conflict resolution, reflected in the first chapter, which lays down the theoretical contours of the rest of the book. And obviously the themes that follow are themes which have to, in our perception, fit into the broad contours that the first chapter provides. And I think that there is a great deal for us to learn in what has been said in terms of the paragraphs that talk of conflict management. In the first few pages, virtually, it talks very briefly of models that have been used elsewhere in the world. Model of Sulah, in the Arab model used perhaps in the Arab-Israeli peace talks, so I'm sure that Israelis will have their own version of Sulah, and similarly other societies and other communities. We know over the years, all the way from Red Indians to the Eskimos, have their own different ways of smoking the peace pipe. We have a very rich tradition in our country of conflict management and resolution, both in our literature and in our historical tradition, in our scriptures, in everything that we know of our ethos and our heritage. Conflict resolution plays a very major role, and I think all of it was distilled in modern times in political thought in our country in what Mahatma Gandhi provided us in terms of conflict resolution. Even his striving, even his attempt to engage in a conflict, to engage in an adversarial battle, as it were, with an enemy, inverted commas, who he wanted to see the last of in our country as quickly as possible, was a process of conflict management and resolution. Mahatma Gandhi never allowed the national movement to get out of his hands. And the only time it appeared to be going out of his hands after Chauri Chaura is the first time when he said, I have nothing to do with it. He controlled it in his own eccentric, in his own unusual, in his own intellectual way, which sometimes wasn't understood even by his very close associates. And he had to say about even a person as close to him as Jawaharlal Nehru, that when I'm gone, he will speak my language, although today he doesn't understand what I'm doing. And I think there are models, both role models as well as conceptual models for conflict resolution and management in our own heritage and ethos, which perhaps we have overlooked and neglected in terms of study, in terms of research, in terms of development, in terms of analysis, in terms of projection in modern conflict situations. And if there is a society full of conflict, it is our society. The biggest problem in our society is that we suffer from a reluctance to accept the truth. We like to be polite and not harsh and not direct about something that has gone wrong. If somebody gets hurt and you say in any of our local languages, "Are you hurt?" and he says, "No, I'm not hurt." You speak to an Englishman, you speak to a European and say, "You are hurt," and he says, "Well, what do you think?" "I am bloody well hurt." But you talk to an Indian and he says, "No, it's all right, don't worry." Now, these are important things. You see a Peter Sellers film, he goes up and he says, "Does your dog bite?" And his answer is, "No, my dog does not bite." He picks up the dog, gets bitten, and says, "But I thought you said your dog doesn't bite." And the answer is, "That's not my dog." Now, we have to understand that every culture, every language, and that's why perhaps we have to pause sometimes and think that our communication, what we are saying, what we are trying to achieve, are we trying to do the right thing or are we trying to do something else? Because the barrier of language which is being imposed in our thoughts, a barrier of an imported language, a barrier of a language perhaps which we don't intrinsically and intuitively understand as well as we would understand our mother tongue, is imposing some kind of a conflict of itself in our understanding. I think some research needs to be done on this. I think as a society, in terms of management of our society, in terms of our governance of our society, we need to give greater importance to this very important aspect. And I believe that that giving conflict management daily practice and practice a pragmatic, practical relevance by introducing an agenda for peace, trade, and foreign policy, I think is a very major contribution that the authors have made to modern thinking in our times. And I acknowledge that, and I would like to say that I hope that we can make use of it. Of course, it will take some time. There is a lot of very hard, difficult stuff, telescoped in very few words and very few pages. And it will take a lot of time to analyze how each fits into a very sketchy model that has been given to us. I would urge that this debate, this discussion, and reading of this book should lead to greater endeavor in developing models of conflict management. We have enough conflicts that we can apply these experimentally to, and I understand that Professor Roger Fisher, who was here for a workshop done in New Delhi some time ago, actually tried to take up one major conflict, which was of Ayodhya, in what is now published as this book called Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreement Without Giving In. I think the nature of conflict, how conflicts emerge, how conflicts are to be handled, and what are we to do beyond conflict is something that we need to look at in developing a role of conflict, a role model or a model of conflict management in our society. We are very bad at it. We allowed Kashmir to become an ulcer. We virtually allowed Uttarakhand to become an ulcer. We allowed Assam to become an ulcer. We've come very close to creating ulcerous situations in other parts of India. And certainly there are today many conflicts, whether of caste or of any other nature or religion, which appear to be irreconcilable conflicts. But I think the strength of our society and the strength of our nationhood is to be able to say that we have a belief, each one of us, that we will be able to overcome these conflicts. On the international plane, many of the positions that we have been taking are positions that have been given to us in a different context. And they served us very well in a different context. But they served us in a context which allowed India to have a position of great importance and a position of great leadership in the world, even when India was not as strong as it is today, when we were not militarily strong, when we were not economically half as strong as we were today. India had a place of primacy because the model that we were projecting, the role that we were projecting for ourselves was very important in the world. What we did in the NAM movement, what we did against apartheid, what we did for liberation of people of Africa and Asia. Suddenly today, a much stronger India, a much more important India in economic terms, India emerging on the global marketplace as a great player, people talking of the emergence of the great Indian elephant in contrast to the tigers of Asia, is still not being able to get that position of primacy that we have had in the heyday of the NAM movement. And I think we need to ask ourselves this question, that this tremendous amount of wealth, as this book says, that is available to us, and talent that is available to us as conflict resolution, is perhaps not being made the cutting edge of our foreign policy, even if I have to say this ourselves. And I think our society as a whole and our people as a whole, we have to think about how we could use this as a cutting edge. We have to get more aggressive. We have become too passive. We withdraw away from conflicts simply because we are self-conscious of some conflicts that have plagued us. We go to the UN, we spend all our time trying to ward off attacks from Pakistan. We spend no time whatsoever in looking at what we can do to help other people resolve their conflicts. We were major role players in the Arab-Israeli problem, and yet when it came to the settlement of the problem, or an attempt to settle the problem, we were not anywhere in the picture. We played a major role in South Africa, but when it came to playing a role of settling the problem between Buthelezi and the ANC, we were not in the picture, because we haven't aggressively taken a model that's available to us intrinsically within the country and said to the world, here we offer you a model better than a model that anyone else is offering. And I would just like to leave this thought with you, that we have this in us. We need to develop it, of course, but in order to develop it, sharpen it, and to chisel it, we may need first to apply it here, learn how to use our own model, and then take that model abroad and apply it to our precepts and foreign policy. Just a few thoughts that I thought I'd leave with you. I would once again join everybody in congratulating the authors in having given us very important seminal work. I hope one day this will be expanded into substantive work which would apply itself to specific situations within the country and also to specific situations as they're emerging internationally in the field of foreign policy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ranbir Singh.
What is the format of this?
Format is that you are speaking after that you are speaks and then I take my format is as you want to make it.
Because is there an answer question at the end of it, Doctor?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sure.
I'm just asking. I just want to
Yeah.
Manchester Times. When I was asked to be a member of this distinguished panel, I readily agreed because I had the good fortune of knowing Manohar Sondhi longer than probably anybody else in this room. And it's a great comfort to declare here that I have survived the experience intact. We were colleagues in the foreign service in a couple of years. He was a little younger than me. And then he decided to take the plunge. Resigned from the foreign service very early. I remember Bernard Shaw had said about, Lenin had said about Bernard Shaw as a good man falling among fabians. Now I will not complete the saying, I will only say Manohar Sondhi is a good man falling among, and I leave that there. Now our subject, I've read this. I just covered. Wait till you look around, I just want to say that I wish you had you mentioned Gorbachev, but you don't mention the Gorbachev-Rajiv Gandhi Delhi Declaration. The paragraph 5 of it is the inclusion which says that all conflicts in the world should be resolved in a non-violent manner. And this is the first time that a communist and then to a leader of the Soviet Union, had put his signatures to a paper in the city of New Delhi saying that future conflict should be resolved in a non-violent manner. I think very significant. And Mr. Gorbachev still talks about it in the Number two is, if you had mentioned also with regard to nuclear disarmament, Rajiv Gandhi's plan which he presented to the United Nations in June 1988. It's very substantial, it's very detailed, it's very comprehensive, and humankind is falling in line with those precepts without mentioning him, but basically this is what all the disarmament, both conventional equal is in the Rajiv Gandhi plan. So I hope we'll have more time to go into it. Now the two revolutions which are of the greatest significance in the 20th century are: one, the revolution in human consciousness and the revolution in science and technology. Now if you look at the world in the year 1900 and see the level of human consciousness then and today, there is a vast difference. Although we may be able to argue, is the world in 1995 a better place to live in than it was in 1895? You can argue that. And if you look at the situation with regard you are here, not people. I will come down. And if you look at the situation in science and technology in the year 1900, one fantastic difference. Now, from time to time in the last 90 years or more, these two revolutions sometimes have pulled in different directions, but when they have met, the consequences are unparalleled in history. The changes in the Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, very largely depended on coverage by television. Science and technology went to every home. Nothing you could do about it. Russia could do anything. In terms of ideas, nothing had happened in the Soviet Union since 1917. Marx's idea of having a dictatorship of the proletariat had degenerated into the dictatorship of the Communist Party. And there was no room for human consciousness or ideas, and they paid the price for it. Ideas went in through science and technology. Now if you look at the world of last 19 years, you say that every possible empire has now disappeared. Half a dozen went after the First World War, the rest went after the Second World War. And we are also a part of this process, except that the Indian freedom movement was not exclusively intellectually oriented. There was dimension given to Bajwal, but it had much more to it. So inevitably our conditioning has been of a particular kind. Now I'll first deal briefly with the internal comparison, then I'll touch briefly on the international. Now I want to state with all due respect to everybody here. See, we hear a great deal about what is wrong with India. We don't hear enough about what is right with India. And what is wrong with India is infinitely less than what is right with India. There are 900 million people living here. Maybe there's turmoil in 100 million, but 800 million people keep their lives. It's a great achievement. Number two, every statement about India is true and so is its opposite. You can argue this is not true of any other one. Three, you see, societies perish not because they have no domestic internal contradictions. They perish because they are unable to reconcile or resolve those contradictions. And the Indian forte has been that we are by and large able to resolve our contradictions in a reasonably peaceful manner. It's part of your culture, part of your tradition, part of your temperament. That these, why are these contradictions not being resolved in Angola? The Christians, the blacks, the tribal. Why are these contradictions not being resolved in Pakistan? For 1,000 years they were Hindus, were part of Pakistan or Afghanistan. Then they were 1,500 years Buddhist. Then they were converted to Islam. Then they became British Indian subjects. 1947 they became Pakistani Muslims. And then they realized that we are Muslims, all right, but we are also Punjabi Muslims, and we are Sindhi Muslims, and we are Baluch Muslims, and we are frontier Muslims, and we are Bengali Muslims. And no worthwhile constitution has come up to resolve the identity problem. So the internal contradictions of Pakistan are bundled into one pudiya and said, Indians are to blame for our ills. You can't resolve internal contradictions this way. British are friends with Pakistan, no, but they must come to terms with this. We have, with all our defects, been able to resolve these because the apparatus for letting off steam exists. Why do you think this thing happened in the Soviet Union? Because even Lenin and Stalin were unable to resolve the nationality question. They suppressed it. They didn't resolve it. They didn't address it. That's why Mr. Gorbachev wrote to Rajiv Gandhi, please, will you let me have a paper on conflict resolution in your country experience. Rajiv Gandhi said to a paper of 160 pages. This seminal document not available to public. Take the relationship between diplomacy and foreign policy. I don't want to be pedantic, but there is different stuff. Unless you are internally coherent in a fundamental basic way, you can't have effective, influential, purposeful, useful. Whenever there has been internal coherence in India, our foreign policy has loosened. Wherever there has been obvious agreement on basic fundamentals, and in the area of foreign policy, we have been fortunate for the last 20 years to have a broad national consensus. But that national consensus gets weakened when internal situations. For example, at the time of Ayodhya, our diplomats had a very difficult time to explain what the hell is going on in this great country. Because everything was available on the television. Science and technology has taken this is all the place. So now the foreign policy is what you do and diplomacy is how you do it. But there has been a revolution in foreign policy and diplomacy. So, diplomacy is now open. Diplomacy is now on the television. Parliament discussions are televised, UN Security Council meetings are televised. So you are answerable to what you do. We just can't say that we will not discuss Jammu and Kashmir in that And please, I also want to make a point. Every one of us must always talk about Jammu and Kashmir, not Kashmir. It's important. Now, in 1965, Sardar Swaran Singh and I was on the delegation, walked out of the Security Council. Debate in October 1965 after the war in Pakistan. And for the next 30 years, nobody ever heard of Kashmir evacuation. But from 1950 we hear nothing else because the international scenario is altered. Beach is very crowded, cable television arrived, mobility of ideas has come, so you have to go to the United Nations and explain. You have to go to the UN and explain. Sometimes something too. But the world is very interested to know how this country all the major regions of the world present, hundreds of languages, different cultures, food habits, sartorial habits. How does the Indian democratic secular experiment work? With all its defects, it works. And that it works is one of the political miracles of the 20th century. And I think we should be proud of it. The defects are there and we correct them in our own way. But the problem of resolving these is first, A, you must address those problems, you must have forums to do it, and basic fundamental fact is that there should be a broad consensus. There is a broad consensus that this country has to remain united, this country has to remain strong, whether the BJP rules, whether the Janata Dal rules, or Congress rules, or CPM rules, or anybody else rules. This fact is now established. And every Indian is aware. And the proof of this is that wherever there is a major national crisis, this country unites. And then we go our own ways and start to things. The other thing is peacekeeping by the United Nations. I just read a book by Sir Anthony Parsons, who was the UK permanent representative in the Security Council a number of years, and then was Margaret Thatcher's foreign policy advisor. His book is called From Cold War to Hot Peace, UN Peacekeeping 1947 to 1994. And he has given a catalogue. And the melancholy fact is that the United Nations peacekeeping operations have been 70% failures. Now why is this? I think this is the question which we should be addressing ourselves in the 50th anniversary of the United Nations. Somalia, Bosnia, Angola, Afghanistan. What is the world in Afghanistan? Cambodia is a success. Congo was a success. Namibia. The rest of the exercise, it doesn't follow it. Cold War is over, and yet we are unable to solve it. Do you realize Vietnam was not even discussed in the Security Council? Because the two superpowers decided to keep it out. So the UN suffered from one defect in the Cold War and another defect because one power is trying to run away with the United Nations. And we have Mr. Rafsanjani coming here and visiting Americans and saying that why is he here? I wouldn't have come. It's not a situation. So the reform of the United Nations peacekeeping process, and India can and must contribute with the vast experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kedwa, editor-in-chief of the...
I'll be brief. Some of my time has been taken by Mr. Radwanski.
won't intervene again. You can write an editorial tomorrow, I can't.
We have heard about that we are a nation of 900 million. I don't think we have foreign policy which merits a nation of 900 million. All of us, most of us travel abroad, and we know the kind of importance India gets abroad in newspapers, in their parliaments, in the thinking of their governments, or their think tanks. We don't figure in much. If at all there is a mention of India, it's only when there is a disaster, there's a drought, or a earthquake, or plague, etc. Not because we are a major player in the world. We had a say in international affairs soon after independence, when we were a much weaker nation. We had more serious problems after independence. But we had a vision, and not on the merits of the foreign policy. But certainly there was a framework. In a difficult time, when we started building a free India, yet we avoided foreign policy, and yet we took the position that we are going to have a say. We fought for it at every international forum. But somewhere down the line, things went awry, and gradually we have seen that we are no longer an international player, although every seventh man in the world is an Indian. The first knock was 1962, experience with China. I was feeling up to that point we were an international player, after that we were not. Conflict with China did deliver a blow to us as a player in the world affairs. We retrieved a bit of prestige in 1971, which was one example where all the wings of the government, all the political schemes, whether in the government or the opposition, were able to evolve a national consensus on an issue that was very important for us in the region around us, and the results were obvious. We succeeded. We were able to overcome internal problems, and we were able to retrieve the prestige we lost in 1962. But after 71, I think our internal stomach aches of the nation have been absorbing our energy so much that we have not bothered our position in the world. And the world does not bother about us also. Probably, I won't blame the world for it, we'll blame ourselves for it. I'm generally not given to mood of self-revelation. But the fact is, after 71, if you see, gradually we have been achieving a diminishing status in the world affairs. Mainly because political consensus, which is required, as Natwar and others have mentioned, that started disappearing, the experience of the emergency, which was unfortunate, and later developments did not allow us to play a major role in the world affairs. We were having a say in the United Nations. We sent our contingents to Gaza, to Cyprus, to Congo, everywhere. And we were greatly elated about it. To Korea also. We were satisfied with it. But now when we want a place in the Security Council, despite the fact that we are a nation of 900 million people around in the world laugh at us plainly. Nobody wants to entertain. They come to Delhi and somebody mentions that, well, why can't India be included in the Security Council? Not yet. Japan will be included. Germany will be included. Not yet. We were told that it requires a major revision of the United Nations Charter. We swallow that. But at the same time, people come to India, they say, we need a contingent for you for peacekeeping operation. Because they don't want American soldiers to die in a peacekeeping operation. 5 American soldiers died in Somalia. They think it's a serious thing. Because 100 Indians died, they don't mind it.
But Security Council, place in the Security Council, where we have some. But they won't let you be a permanent member of the Security Council. So much for the place for you. Natwar is right, another is right, that much depends, as Salman also has mentioned, that much depends upon our capacity to resolve internal conflicts. I'm afraid we have not been resolving internal conflicts satisfactorily, or they have taken too long. Kashmir, we have not resolved internal conflicts. That's why the 3 wars, and that's why the pressure from the world community on us to sort out Kashmir. And the solutions being offered to us are definitely disadvantageous. The third option is being talked about.